Hey, everybody, welcome to Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men, where we redeem men's conversations, talk about the right things in the right ways. My name's Scott Hatfield. Thanks for checking out the podcast. This podcast is all about creating a strong, godly culture of men that fight for the most important things. And we're in the middle of a series that we're looking at 5 key giants that the enemy uses to discourage and destroy men. And today's giant is criticism. And today's guests are Jon Weece and Scott Nickell. How are you guys?
We're good.
Just a topic.
I'm great. I'm trying to do some product placement.
I was going to say, I was watching you turn this.
What are you slowing down on me for?
I was laughing at Mark Pope last night because they had 2 little Gatorade bottles in front of him, in his post-game press conference. So I thought, I'll advertise for Lamp House Coffee in Lynch, Kentucky.
I was going to say, are you getting any royalties on
I don't know,
this?
but I'm hoping. I haven't been down there yet, but I've heard they got a good breakfast for like $5. So
this episode's sponsored by
Lamp House Coffee in Lynch, Kentucky.
They don't know it.
Come on, y'all.
That's right. That's right. Go get their coffee. Get their breakfast, man. Get something to drink, This is going to be a stretch because it's on criticism. I hope you guys can get there. It's going to be great. How are you all?
Good, man.
Good.
Scott got 3 negative emails
before we walked down.
It's going to be a stretch. I want you guys just to pray about it and see what happens. Hey, we're coming off the heels of our men's retreat, 540 guys, 5 campuses. You both were there, taught on Saturday. Share some highlights of things that you saw and heard from the weekend.
Yeah, when I got down there on Saturday afternoon, a lot had already happened.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to pull on to that camp. It was funny because I rode there with one of our elders, and he couldn't come last minute because his kids had a swim meet that got scheduled, and he wanted to be there for that. And so we roll onto the camp, and he starts seeing all these cars parked, and he says, hey, how many men are here? I was like, I don't know, man. We had 600 and some sign up. So he was like, what?
Yeah.
He almost stopped the car. I was like, well, what were you expecting? He was like, I thought maybe there'd be 100. I was like, glad you had so much faith. You're one of our elders. What's the matter with you?
That's right.
So, but man, the energy level was huge. There were guys out fishing. There were guys playing ball. People just running around everywhere.
Yeah.
You could tell that they had already had a really great experience. And so it was fun for me because it made me really excited to be able to speak in a couple hours after that,
Yeah.
And then just man after man came up to me and started sharing how powerful it had already been for them. So the energy was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, just seeing multiple generations, seeing old and young interacting. I love that.
Yeah.
It
was so good. So good. In these retreats, they can be really, really powerful catalysts for engagement and mission. And so anything that you go, hey, I just want to warn guys or I want to challenge guys coming out of that, just because we purposely said, hey, we're coming down off the mountain. This is not a spiritual high. This is not about Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's about Monday. But anything that you'd share just to either warn them or encourage them about?
Just before we stepped in here, we were talking about men who are experiencing already pushback from the enemy, having a difficult week. We always tell people, too, when they get baptized, don't be surprised if you have a really rough week this week. The enemy hates what you just did.
Yeah.
The enemy hates the resolve that some of those men had, coming away from that retreat, and so they get
wants to crush it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So don't be surprised. That doesn't mean you should love it, but don't be surprised.
That's right.
And be ready. And I would say continue to lean into those relationships. That's been one of the cool things is hearing from men go, man, I'm in a text thread now with a group of men that I met at this place, and so we encourage each other, we call each other, we're meeting again, that kind of thing. Keep doing that stuff. It'll go a long way.
Yeah.
I think continue to invite other men into our circle. There's so many men out there who don't have the friendships that these guys have and that we have, and it's like we've got to have other men that we can lean on.
Yes.
So once you learn that lesson, hey, I can trust these guys and this is good for my life, man, who else do you know that needs this?
Yeah, the groups that are starting, locker room groups that are starting, guys signing up for ministry, those are all good things that if you want to do this for the long haul, then you've got to have a group of people and you got to be on a team. And so that's super, super critical. Well, as we dig into today on this topic of criticism, Nickell, I know you loved, because I've been in too many interviews with you with other potential staff, that you love word associations. And so I'm going to rapid fire some of these just to get us in the water and just share whatever.
You may drown us in this water. We'll see what happens.
I was going to say share whatever comes to mind. Share whatever comes to mind as it relates to just filtering through the Holy Spirit. But I'll start with something easy. Jimmy Kimmel's segment called Mean Tweets.
Oh, we've talked about for years doing that.
We wanted to do a video. I just thought it'd be fun to pull clips from some of the emails we get and some of the voicemails, because
the voicemails are great.
They're fantastic. People just chewing us out for
Weird stuff.
Weird stuff,
Yeah.
the way we dress.
Yeah.
One guy told me one sideburn of mine was shorter than the other.
I remember that.
What are you paying attention to?
Easy, man.
Yeah. So, we need to do that.
My ears just aren't straight, man. Get over it.
Yeah.
It made me self-conscious for the rest of my life.
Nobody's symmetrical.
That's right. That's right. All right. Paul Feinbaum's show after an Alabama loss as it relates to criticism.
Well, we both know we preach bad sermons from time to time, and we're very aware that
Sure.
they're not home runs.
Nobody
every time.
feels it more than we do.
We know.
Trust us.
We know sometimes when we're going to stage, this isn't going to be good.
Right.
And so then when they criticize you, you're like, yeah, you're telling us something we already
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
or that our families haven't already told us. Dad, don't say that again.
Yeah.
Have y'all ever listened to the show, Paul Feinbaum, when Alabama loses?
It's
I've seen
unbelievable.
clips. Like, I haven't.
People lose
Their
their
minds.
Oh, yeah.
minds. I mean, and even with Saban, it's like, dude, he's the GOAT. And still, man, he'd never been able to coach offense. I mean, it's like, golly, are you serious? Look at all the rings.
How
all
many
the
rings?
banners.
He's almost out of hands.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. All right, here's another one. Social media comments and keyboard warriors.
Coward. That's just what the first word that comes to mind. It's very easy to do those things behind a keyboard in anonymity. Makes people very brave.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it's not biblical. We're supposed to look each other in the eyes and have tough conversations.
Yes.
And if you really care about us, come talk to us. We'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we don't have social media. I don't
right,
know.
yeah.
I don't know what's going on. I mean, I had something blow up last week. I didn't even know it blew up. And thanks to our staff for putting out a clip they shouldn't have put out. But anyway, that's another question.
Oh, gotcha.
So you had to defend it, and I had some fun phone conversations. Was told I wasn't going to heaven. That was
Really?
yeah,
You got that one?
I got that one, which was awesome.
It's been a little while since I've had that one.
No, so Scott baptized me.
That's good.
Feel a lot
Now
better.
you're back.
I'm better.
That's
I'm
good,
better.
man. That's good.
He's back and better than ever.
Jeez. Monday morning quarterbacks. What do you think about when you hear those words? Because we've heard that forever, but
Yeah, I mean, again, it just comes down to easy for you to say and judge. Being a quarterback on the field is painful, difficult, hard, complicated. It's a lot of things to it. From your couch or your sofa, it's easy to judge.
Yeah, I'm just not critical of anyone about anything.
yeah.
Because of what I do.
Monday morning quarterbacks
It's
aren't
hard.
Saturday or Sunday quarterbacks, right? I mean,
We've joked at times about we can turn over the mic to you for 10 minutes
See
on
how it
Sundays
feels.
if you want.
open mic.
I had my brakes. I got my brakes worked on. They screwed up something pretty major, and and the lady was afraid she was going to get fired. And I was like, man, let me talk to your manager. There's no need for anyone to get fired of us. We all screw stuff. But that's that hyper intense. Yeah, it's like, gosh, man, I'm the last guy that's going to be hard on you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, here's one that you guys have a lot of experience with. Kids sports, the relationship between sidelines and people, other teams, parents, umpires. Talk about that.
I mean, I was just telling you guys a story before this podcast last night. At a flag football game, I had to break up a fight, between multiple people.
These aren't children.
No, these are grown-ups.
Yeah,
these are all on the sideline. Kids,
Primarily
9
moms.
to 11, mostly moms with babies on their hips. It was like a scene out of a movie. And also not the first time I've been in that. And it's also always, I think it's fascinating when I'm the peacemaker,
I find that the funniest part.
I'm the one ratcheting down.
You've come a long way.
Y'all are too intense. If I'm the one.
I keep expecting a phone call. Can you come get Nickell out of prison?
That's right.
He beat up a ref.
Can you
Whatever
bail me
it'll
out?
be, I promise. I may not be able to keep my job, but I promise you'll be proud of me.
It'll be a good
that
one.
was a noble cause.
Peacemaker. I love it.
Not peacekeeper.
That's right. That's right. How about this phrase? Okay. When someone says, with all due respect.
That's usually preliminary to I'm not going to show you any respect at all.
Yeah, I think you're an idiot.
Don't you love that?
That's what you say before you say something very disrespectful.
Yeah, let me throw out something really nice and then just mow you down.
Yeah.
Ugh. And here's the last one, word association. Your email inbox.
It's love, hate,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Polarizing.
Yeah, I just think you have to be careful on both ends. You get a lot of praise that you don't deserve, and you get a lot of criticism you don't deserve. And it's like, that old adage, don't let compliments go to your head and don't let criticism go to your heart. Both things are true when it comes to emails. You just have to kind of put them in the right categories and know
Yeah.
where you're going to take certain things from.
Yeah.
You know, we have a target audience, so we both know when we get a compliment from that group of people, okay, we're not fishing for it, but
Yeah.
man, they're who we're aiming Jesus at.
Sure.
So that's different than when you get criticism from a Christian and they're not our target audience. They're going to be in heaven with us. They know how to feed themselves.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
you know, so.
I've told young preachers for a long time, if your identity is determined by your inbox on Monday morning, for good or for bad, you are not going to be able to do this for very long.
That's good.
And I really do mean that on the good side. It's equally as dangerous.
It is.
You know, if you get enthralled with those "you saved my life" kind of emails and forget that you hadn't saved anybody's
You are
life,
not the
Jesus
we're not
did.
the hero in this.
Right.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, today, this one's super important for our locker room community because our hope is as we're building strong, godly men that are intentional, that stand up and fight for all the things that matter to God. If you do that, then you're most certainly going to experience criticism. I mean, and you should expect it. And the reality is no one that tries to make their lives count are going to be able to avoid this giant. And so if you lead in any way, you'll have people second guessing, you'll have people tearing you down, you'll have people Monday morning quarterbacking your decisions. They'll poke holes in the stuff that you do and they'll pick you apart. Dealing with criticism is a part of the journey. It's a part of leadership. And one of the greatest weapons that the enemy uses for leaders, whether you're a Christian leader or in a church or you lead in any capacity, one of the greatest weapons he uses is discouragement. And one of the best ways that he can discourage us is through criticism. And so we can't avoid it. And the reason I wanted you both on here is because you guys both have a lot of experience in this topic. And you're not just coworkers for me, you're friends. And I don't even know half of the stuff. I don't even know 10% of the stuff. But you guys deeply understand this topic. And so I'll set the stage like this. I think, and again, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think there's complexity that comes from criticism from what we do, where we are, our church. There's criticism, number one, from people outside the church. They don't know Jesus. They see a mega church or they see people on TV like you guys, and there's criticism. There's criticism that comes from, number two, from other churches and other church leaders, which is just weird, wrong, and sinful. And number three, some of the most painful kinds of criticism comes from those inside the church, people that we care about. And so do you mind just talking about those three layers and how you, not so much how you navigate, but just how that feels, you know, when you, I mean, some of it we get, it makes sense. Some of it you go, this is sideways, this is friendly fire, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah, no matter how people, you know, talk about it, it hurts on some level because the ego is fragile for all of us, and you know we're fallen, so we have to be careful. Again, categorically, what we do with it, we have to take it immediately to the Father. I think the other thing you have to do is always ask yourself what truth is in this criticism, and if there is truth, man, take it to heart. Thank the person for it.
Sure.
Or, you know, if you're not sure in the moment, ask some other people. I like bringing other people's perspectives into it and say, man, is this true about me? Or, you know, usually there's something in what they're saying that you can grow from, learn from. So be humble enough to receive that. That's an important step for me.
Yeah. As far as those three audiences, I find that those who are not Christians, often that's based on misperceptions. And it's understandable. It's like they're on TV. It's a big place. You know, it can be based on
Six
a whole
Flags
bunch of
over
things.
Jesus, you name it.
It can be based on hearsay, and oftentimes it's not at all based on an actual experience with this place or with our people. That tends to dramatically shift people's opinions. So I have a lot of grace for that. The criticism that comes from other Christians or Christian leaders and things like that, that tends to provoke me the most, and I tend to ignore it the most because of that dynamic. Like I can get very easily lured into that sideways energy. And that's where I think it's important to utilize what Jon just talked about, of taking that to trusted leaders. I've always had a habit of going to elders and folks who know me the best to go, hey, this came from outside of this place, another Christian leader. Do you guys see this at all in me? And if they don't, they're in that trusted place for a reason. If they go, well, there's a little bit of truth to that, then I can embrace that. Billy Graham always said, turn your critics into coaches. And I can't think of a person outside of Jesus who probably got criticized more than him. So if you think about, like, okay, even if this is ill-intended and, you know, somebody wanted this to hurt me, is there still something in it that could be a little bit true that I could grow and work on?
Yeah.
It can become a valuable thing, even though the enemy intended it for evil.
Yes.
So.
And I think turning it into something productive, that's, the Bible says he who refreshes others will be refreshed.
Yeah.
And so for me, because I'm on the receiving end of so much criticism, I've just decided I'm going to be an encourager.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who's going to offer flattery, but when I see people doing something really well, I'm going to let them know, especially if they're working in a church. Like that's the one that shocks me the most is when it's from other Christians, churches, leaders. You're like, wow, you know how hard this is, and you know that Satan's already involved. Why would you want to make that worse for someone?
Yeah, we're in the same foxhole,
Yeah,
and you're turning your rifle.
Yeah, you're
same
shooting
team.
at us. It seems
same
odd
team.
to me. So I've just tried to be on the other side of that, genuinely not critical of anyone, and that's a good way to live. It's just a better posture.
Yeah, like living in Seattle, Starbucks in the city of Seattle, there's you could go to a different Starbucks every day for the whole year. And at one time there were plenty of other coffee companies and mom and pop coffee places along the way. And what you would learn about Starbucks is that they would put a Starbucks not too far from those and basically weaken and destroy these other companies. And it's like, and they just have continued to grow. And it's like, our church in all 5 of our campuses and the things that we do, we know that we're not the only church, and we can't be the only church that reaches people. And so, and it doesn't matter the size, and it doesn't matter, none of that matters. It's like we're in this together, and we're just trying to be faithful to the mission that God called us to. And the reality is different churches manifest the Great Commission in different ways. And so, yeah, I never hear that out of you all. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, why would we attack our brother or our sister who's hopefully we're trying to link arms to do this together,
Yeah, the pushback on that is often it's easy for you guys to say you're the big church in town, and that may or may not be true.
Yeah.
But there's also things that make it really hard to be the big church,
Yes.
big church in town and in the region as well.
Yeah.
We want to see lost and broken people come to saving faith in Jesus Christ, whether that happens at this church over here or our church. That's the aim and that's the goal. So legitimately, it's easy for me to say to Christians, and I'm sure we'll get to this, like when they say they want to leave our church to go to another church, like that may sting a little bit, but you're already going to heaven.
Yeah.
That's great. You know,
We'll see you on the other
we'll
side.
see you there.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll expand this topic around criticism just because it's obviously not just where we live, but it's plenty of men that get criticism from a spouse or a parent or a boss or someone in their life that they care about. And just a general question, why, and we kind of touched this, but why is criticism so hard? Why is it so hard when it comes, it's like, you mentioned it hurt, it does hurt. And it's funny because you don't ever callous up so much that it doesn't, and so why does it sting so badly?
Yeah, I mean, I think because of the grains of truth that can be involved, that can hurt. We don't like to face hard things, I mean, if I have the choice between going through my day with absolutely no criticism and some criticism, I'll take the no criticism, whether that's from a spouse, whether that's from a kid, whether that's from a friend, whether that's from somebody I don't know. I mean, I'd rather go through the day without receiving criticism if I at all can. Yeah. I think men in particular, man, you're working, you're out there doing something, and then when you come home, if you then receive criticism, that's probably the ultimate, in regards to this category of like, man, this is my spouse, and I feel like the moment I walk through the door, all I receive is criticism, or all I have is these kids telling me I don't, do things right, or whatever that may be. Yeah. And there's probably something in that criticism that's indicative of a place where you're being passive or something like that.
Sure.
But it just hurts because it's personal to us. And like John said, our egos are fragile, and we don't want to be bad at stuff or mess things up or do things wrong. But we're fallible and we're sinful and we're imperfect, and we don't like that, and that's understandable.
Yeah,
yeah. I think sometimes it's it's born out of someone's immaturity or insecurity. So they're feeling bad about themselves, and they want you to feel as bad about yourself as they feel about themselves.
No doubt.
So they're piling that on you, and you sense that, and know that. And I think as a Christ follower, it's hard sometimes to demonstrate some compassion towards them, to receive that and not lash out. Yeah. And so then you you accumulate
Yes.
over time, this anger and this sadness. And sometimes as men, it's hard for me to identify, like, why am I so frustrated today? Well, it's because all week I've taken nothing but
Been hit with rocks.
shots. Yeah, you know, and like, well, yeah, man, I'm wounded.
Yeah.
You know, and so knowing how to handle that, we're just not wired for that as men.
Yeah.
It's a struggle for us to connect the dots between words and emotions and, you know, process that in a healthy way. So that's why exercise is so important. That's why you got to have other outlets that you can get the stress out. Because otherwise you'll just start taking it out on the people around you and you'll dish it out. And you'll become just as immature and insecure as those people.
Yeah, I don't know when I started this, but years ago I started doing this little exercise where I'll recognize I'm mad or I'm sad or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I'll have to really take some time to go, okay, why am I? And usually it doesn't take too long to go, oh, it's that email or it's that conversation I had or that person who said this. But if I don't do that, I'll float through the day with that emotion coming out on people.
Yeah.
And I won't recognize why, and they certainly won't be able to understand why.
Sure.
You know, but once I can recognize the why, then that helps me to then control whatever that emotion is and make sure it's not coming out on people.
Allison will sometimes say to me when I'm sitting on the couch, "You okay?"
Yeah.
You know, and that's a clear indicator that I haven't done a good job
You're putting
of
something off.
Yeah, man.
Something you're carrying.
I'm stiff arming.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, sorry, it's not you.
Like you're sitting over there watching Rambo again. You all right?
Envisioning yourself.
Dude,
Get 'em, kill
every
'em
time
all.
the Jason Bourne movies come on, I'm just immediately, I don't care where it is. We can be an hour into the movie and I start watching it.
Yeah.
She's always amazed. She's like, you all right?
Yeah.
Same thing. I'm,
Yeah.
like, I'm fine.
Love it.
Let's see
Love
some
it.
stuff blow up.
You're right. Hurt people do hurt people, and sometimes there's truth in it, and sometimes, you know, I've had some conversation with a couple guys this week whose dads were just so unbelievably critical of them that create these wounds that men carry, and they cut channels, and they lead to us either not being able to stop because we're always working, always trying to achieve, always trying to prove somebody differently, or they just are paralyzed by their wounds, and they've carried stuff or resentment or whatever that looks like. But the enemy uses this one to weaponize criticism toward us, and he'll do it to discourage or to distract or to defeat and destroy men. How do you see why does he use this weapon? And he uses it this is a weapon he goes, I'm gonna crush guys with this.
We're limited resources, and any amount of energy that goes toward responding to criticism or being mad about criticism or sad about criticism or whatever that is takes energy away from the things we would otherwise be doing, which hopefully are things that are better for the kingdom, whether that be in our marriage, in our work, with our kids, whatever that may be. I mean, I can't tell you the time lost, you know, where I've been on a sideline or I've been on a date with my wife or whatever that is, but I'm not really there, you know, and even earlier in ministry, the time lost of like sitting there with an email in front of me, you know, on the side of a ball field, or even while she goes to the bathroom or whatever, or even text messaging, that kind of thing. So the enemy just knows, like, man, if I can deplete his energy level, that takes away from what he could be doing that are, you know, things that Jesus wants him to be doing.
Yeah, like one of those boxing matches where if they just keep hitting you in the body, they deplete you, and once you're depleted, it's hard to fight. You know, go ahead, John.
Well, we've talked about, you know, before, the temperature in your household, and our tendency as men is to want to go to the thermostat and try to figure out, okay, why is the temperature not the way it needs to be? And so we're looking for exterior reasons.
Right.
You know, it's the old adage, you need to put the thermometer in your own mouth and go, okay, a lot of this is going to rise and fall on my mood. And what I'm bringing into the household. And, you know, we don't want to own that sometimes. And Satan, he's smart, man. He knows that. And again, back to our own insecurity and maturity, he preys on where there's weakness.
Yes, you'll find cracks. Our response is it's not natural to want to move toward this. We would rather hurt back. When people, you know, send us something you'd like to just type away really hard on your keyboard, or
I've done that. Done it plenty of times.
to launch back. And it really does take a lot, because you have to push past your pride. You have to look for clarity in maybe what they're saying, even if they didn't say it rightly. But it takes humility and spiritual maturity and emotional health to navigate it.
Well, and I would say to that point, there's some kind of weird rule book we're all playing by that we don't have to play by.
Yeah.
So I've often said, just because everyone else plays by email, I don't.
Yeah.
So I delete a lot of stuff and I've just chosen not to respond. And I learned that the hard way. When I was a younger pastor, I felt like, well, man, maybe I can change this person's mind. And then I would get in this endless, and that takes time and energy away from things that are actually more productive. So I've just learned, just delete, and if they keep sending them, delete it again. Yeah. And I don't read anything if there's not a name on it or an address on it when it comes via mail.
Yeah.
You don't have to engage. There's no reason.
We've not promised that, and that's the other thing. And I think for men sitting out there, you may not be a preacher who stands on a platform,
right?
But you don't have to make promises that you don't want to keep, So if you don't want to be responsive to certain kind of criticisms in certain kind of ways, it's good to come up with those kinds of filters to go, I'm not going to respond to that, And I think social media adds a whole new dynamic. I can't tell you the amount of men that I talk to that it's become clear, like they're all ramped up about something somebody said on like Facebook. And part of me wants to go, bro, you're a grown man.
Yeah.
Get off of that, and at the very least, if you're going to stay on it, don't get dragged into meaningless arguments and criticisms. And I think at the height of the political season, it probably happens more than ever. But you don't have, to your point, you don't have to play by these rules. So don't make promises you don't want to keep.
And silence is always a good option in conversations. Half the time, I just walk away awkwardly. And my wife will say, "Goodness sakes, that was a weird." And I'm like, "Well, I didn't want to." Weigh in. Your words carry weight, so rather just not say anything. I have opinions on just about everything.
Yeah.
Surprise, right. But I'm not going to share those publicly with most people. So,
well, you alluded to this, but early on in Euro's ministries, different places where you've led, it doesn't matter what's been big top of the org chart or the bottom of the org chart. When criticism came early on, what were some of the ways that you didn't do this well? You think of anything?
Oh yeah. I've had to apologize a lot. I really have.
Yeah, I remember
you both. It was like a coin. Oh yeah.
If we were of the generation that can be triggered, you would say you just triggered us.
That's right.
I remember one time after I'd stepped into high school ministry following you, I had a leader who was just taking shots at me, and I was just doing the best I could to try to build this thing and all that kind of thing. And I remember another key leader, he could tell I was just hot. I mean, hot. Yeah. Because this was somebody that I perceived to be as an ally who I had worked with for a long time as a volunteer. And they were just going nuts on me over something that I don't even remember what it is now. Sure. I felt like was totally irrational and fair, all that kind of stuff. And he just put me in his car and we drove around the parking lot for a little while. And he just let me go. He just let me vent. He just said, get it all out, and he's like, all right, are you done? I was like, I think so. And
one more lap.
Yeah, I was like, well, how about we drag race down Harrisburg Road? But those moments.
I got an email one time from a guy who we had a Pepsi machine in the building, and he wanted us to remove it because Pepsi was supporting something that was sinful. And I just emailed back, hey, every dollar's dirty. That was kind of my line. Well, then he fired back this really long one, so I thought, you know what? You've earned this.
Let's cross swords.
And so I just went to task and basically said, you need to find a piece of land, make your own clothes. I went down this whole, it was just ridiculously stupid and mean. Bumped into him recently and just hugged him. And I put my hands on his shoulders. I haven't seen the guy since then, so he probably left our church. And I said, hey, man, that email I fired at you. And he didn't remember it. It was good. But I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, you guys teach, and so there's so much, and they can grab a word, a phrase, and when they hear it, they then take it into where they've been, their hurt, church hurt, family hurt, whatever that is, and it just you didn't say what you didn't mean what they thought that you meant, and they just blow through this with tirade after tirade.
Well, and I think too, and this may help men as well, because as we approach the holidays and maybe there's some apprehension around that person's going to be sitting across the table or that person's going to be at that house when we go visit. There's this principled, idea of like, don't cast your pearls before swine. Yeah. Do these folks even have, let's say you're 1,000% correct in whatever opinion it is that you hold. Does this person even have the capability of metabolizing what you're going to give them? Right. And the answer is often absolutely not. Yeah. You've got years worth of proof
Experience.
to
They're not
show that that's
well.
not the case.
Yeah.
You're not going to change them over pumpkin pie this Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You're not going to change them over Facebook. You're not going to change them fill in the blank. So you can decide ahead of time, I'm just not going to spend my energy on that.
Don't poke the bear, man.
Yeah,
your heart.
I'm nobody's
Yeah.
savior. I don't have to fix you, in this regard. So that'll save you a ton of energy. I've learned the hard way so many times over the years not to do
He's
that.
quiet over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not getting in there.
Saving
Not
my
doing
strength.
it. Yeah, that's right. Oddest criticism out of left field. You mentioned your
machine.
sideburns and Pepsi machines, or funniest criticism that you've ever gotten. Can you think of anything?
I mean, I got one just the other day that was very unique. I don't think I've ever been told this in my whole
Oh boy!
can't wait to
whole
hear
preaching. It landed. It was the sermon I did. I don't know when this airs, but pre-election, on staying connected. John had the sermon on staying calm. I had stay connected, and I delved into the election a little bit and basically just said, hey, none of these words written about Jesus were written about anybody on your ballot. So deal with it. And this. But this response was, I had preached a feel-good sermon. I've never been accused of that in my whole life. So
Wow.
I actually was delighted. I was like, huh.
How about that?
JR's even over there going, that's never happened. So I was like, that's really out of left field, So that was weird. That was definitely a weird one. I had one, John will remember this. And you may too, I made a reference to the depictions of Jesus that we've seen in film.
Yeah.
Over the years, and most of the time in those films, Jesus is like blonde hair, blue-eyed, skinny, and looks like he could never, win a fight with anyone ever, including my, daughter.
Yeah.
And I put a picture of the actor who played Jesus in Jesus of Nazareth on the screen, which is what I grew up seeing in the 80s, you know. And then I put a picture of a Tex Cobb, who's a boxer who fought Larry Holmes,
Raised in Arizona,
just kind of rough looking dude. And I said Jesus probably actually looked more like Tex Cobb.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this one person lost their mind to the degree that they wanted to not only email me about it, but my favorite person on staff, Laura Reiser, this is one of the strikes I have against her. She set up a phone conversation with this person for me to have, and I was in my office talking to this person.
Yeah.
And I got probably 12 words in over the course of 45 minutes as this person just literally screamed at me on the phone.
Steamrolling.
And Laura and Kim were just sitting outside the office just dying laughing at me the whole time. I walked out and went, don't ever schedule me with a phone call like that again. It was the most unreasonable conversation I think I've ever had. It was wild.
Barely a conversation.
This person was absolutely committed to the fact that the person who played Jesus of Nazareth was basically Jesus. It was weird. I couldn't figure out what the premise was. Yeah. You know me. I need to know what your premise is. Where's the logic in what you're telling me?
Anything else that comes to mind for you? Oddest, funniest?
I mean, I've just gotten so much criticism over the years that I don't have categories for it. It's all
dress is not a big deal now for us, but
no, we
back
used to
in
get
the day
that a lot.
It was.
Yeah, we used to get style of dress, and it's weird. Like I've preached in a pretty consistent way. My style's very unique. It's not changed.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like people have this expectation that they bring to the table about what they want a sermon to be, and I'm like, there's probably hundreds of churches in the area you can go to
just that.
To do that. I don't do this, and the way I do it is proven to be effective with a certain demographic of people. That's why I do it.
The altar call's a big one.
Yeah, we don't have flags on our stage. We don't do altar calls. We don't have a communion table. You can get into the furniture thing. I mean, you name it. We've had criticism over it. So,
but there are people in that baptistry week after week.
Dude,
they ignore
it's
that.
the coolest thing to go. Yeah, I know traditionally that's the way the church was, but somehow when you bring grace and truth into these matters, somehow, some way, the Holy Spirit does the heavy lifting, and people keep coming.
Well, and people overlay a theology that they've picked up on unknowingly sometimes in another stream of Christianity, and think that it's a biblical. It may be fine methodologically, nothing wrong with it necessarily, but you're not going to find it in the Bible. So even this idea of doing like an altar call, certainly leading people through like a sinner's prayer or something like that. That's fine if that's what you
Yeah.
want to do in your church. It's just
Yeah.
you won't find it in the Gospels.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
I think the other thing is not to denigrate
Yeah.
that stuff or put
right.
that stuff down. Like I preach in a lot of different churches. I don't really care
Yeah.
what's going on as long as I'm given that opportunity to share Jesus. I'm in. I'll do that all day long. But I'm not going to do what people do to me. I've just learned that lesson over the years. I'm not going to put other stuff down. It's not worth it.
One of the first sermons in this role that you're now in a long time ago, I remember you brought a big frame. Do you remember this?
Empty picture frame.
Yeah, and you talked about how everybody comes in with a defined picture of what they think the church should be. And so you were digging out kind of the Acts 2 Great Commission, where we are going as a church to contextualize the Great Commission. But I just thought that was 20 years ago. And I remember, and that's so true because people really do come in with all this other stuff, be it good or open-handed, sure, you could that, but this is who we are.
Well, and they also play this short game. They want you in that one sermon to hit literally
Everything.
end times, politics, marriage, parenting, and it's like I'm in this for the long haul.
Yeah.
So, man, there's next
Yeah.
Sunday I can write another
That
sermon.
next year,
yeah.
you know,
So that's hard. They put pressure on you that you don't need to feel, and I think that's true in any occupation you're in.
Yeah, yeah. Most painful criticism probably comes from inside. Could be a friend or a former friend or longtime Southland person, former staff and elders. Can you think about, and again, obviously we're going to be careful and cautious, but if you, as you think back to that, how did you process some of that?
Yeah, I
hard
think the ones that are the most difficult for me, again, if you're a Christian, even if you're a close friend and you leave the church, which I've had, that hurts just because of the relational connection. But at the end of the day, if that's a place you want to be and serve, great. You know, the ones that I think hurt me the most are when people who are checking Jesus out, they're giving us a chance, and there's something that they run up against, and it's usually something that's an uncompromising biblical truth or reality that they're just unwilling to surrender or lay down. And sometimes the claws really come out on those issues.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I've often taken the posture of going, man, I didn't write the mail. I'm just delivering it.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't have the liberty of changing this text that is our authority.
Right.
Just because it's going to be more, that would be more accommodating to you or your lifestyle. And then you see people, you know, run off into that lifestyle. And a lot of times they get just brutalized, you know, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Two things for me. One is people that know the challenge that I inherited here.
Yep.
And they know the difficulty of it. And they haven't come to me personally. They've just criticized me, and that's gotten back to me. And that just hurts because they know the assignment I was given here is not an easy assignment.
Yeah.
Running parallel to that is, to Scott's point, when you have a lost person that is critical of something you're doing and they're right.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I can play this out a little bit.
Yeah.
So they're pointing out something in our ministry methodology that is off.
Yeah.
But I have this secondary responsibility over here to help this church, the whole church, get to a place where it's more effective, and I have to be patient in that. That's been my journey here, my story here is helping this church get to a place where it's actually healthy.
Yeah.
So when I do get criticism, those are from lost people, and they're right.
Yeah.
Those hurt because I can't just flip a switch and make this thing change overnight. I have to play the long game out. And man, those are tough. Those are the ones that have kept me up, and I've thought, wow. And I've had to surrender that to God and go, God, I'm doing my best to be faithful with both the mission and the methodology of this church in a way that it doesn't kill the church in the process.
Yeah, you've been so helpful over the years to be able to say, hey, this church doesn't look exact. Like if I got to just draw up a
not my
church from
preference.
scratch, this church actually doesn't look like my preferences. I think most people assume that a church is always going to look like the pastor's preferences, and that's especially not true. It's
dangerous.
Church that's multi-generational.
That's really big saying that, because I think people think that's why they get hung up. It's their preference, and just to be able to speak out loud to go, hey, this is not about what we want or what we think is the best or coolest. It's about what is best and what is God directing us to do as we strategically try to figure out how to live out the mission. You know, I think I'm right here, but is the majority of criticism that lands in your all's world because of preaching? Is that the biggest part?
Yeah,
Yeah.
by far.
Yeah, I mean, it's Second place is a distance second place
Yeah.
for sure. It's just because
Yeah.
of
The nature.
bandwidth of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of it comes externally, because we're on TV and the internet
Yes.
and things like that.
Yeah, and we say I can say this. Scott can say this too. We both have said things that weren't in our notes,
Yeah.
Sure.
and they just came in the moment. We're tired. We're mad. Something went wrong, and so we just say it.
Right.
And it's like, right in that moment, I just got 20 emails, and I'm to blame for that. Like that's my own. You guys call me Grandpa Weece. That's the old man on the porch
Sure.
saying, "Get off the lawn."
Sure.
Part of me every once in a while
That's
that
right.
comes out. So
And there's, you and I talked about this at the very beginning of this season, but, what are the lightning rods? It's like sexuality, identity, gender, marriage. I mean, it's like the reality is now in our world, because of all the other things that are going on and because of people's freedom to feel like they can express whatever, how we handle grace and truth, it doesn't matter the topic, right? I mean, it really
Oh, no.
doesn't.
no, you're going to get it on every
And
subject.
that's actually how I've tried to measure ministry. It sounds weird. Ministry success in one way or another is
Yeah.
if I'm being shot from both sides.
Yeah, grace and truth.
If I'm being accused of, man, you just show too much grace to sinners. Why do you hang out with people like that? Why are you even paying attention? I mean, I had a conversation yesterday where it's like, why do I have to explain to you that our mission is what Jesus' mission is?
Yeah.
To seek and save
Yeah.
the lost.
Yeah.
But I have to defend that all the time, and I'm willing to do it. And at the same time, if I'm also taking shots for why are you making these claims about biblical authority and truth and marriage and gender and fill in the blank.
Yeah.
If I'm getting both of those in healthy doses all throughout the course of my ministry, I'm probably positioning myself in the same place that Jesus was because he got shot from both sides. You got the
Correct.
Pharisees on one side shooting him. You
Yep.
got the Sadducees on the other side shooting him.
Yep.
You got the Roman government. You got the whole 9 yards. So,
Totally.
but if I'm only taking fire from one side, that might be indicative that I'm getting out of balance.
That's good. That's really
I don't go looking for it.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah,
I'm not
sure.
a guy that's going to go looking for a fight. But it's interesting. I've always been in one, and I think I think the reason for that is simply because I'm a threat to Satan, and that's exactly, to Scott's point, where I want to live, and I want to surround myself. My friends are all threats to Satan. I associate with everyone. I don't hang out with everyone. So the people I love being around are the ones that I know Satan's attacking.
Yeah.
I like being around them because I feel like I'm in like company. If that makes
Band
sense.
of brothers.
Band of
Yeah.
brothers.
Yeah, you said at the retreat too, you said, I want us to be men that when we wake up in the morning, the demons know who we are, and I think that's powerful. And again, we all have issues and struggles, and we all get bent up about silly things, and the reality is the enemy can use those people to discourage what we're doing in a great way.
Most Christians are not in that category.
Yeah.
Right.
We talk about this a lot, and I'm big on verbs, but most Christians are praying, singing, studying.
Yeah.
It's the Christians that are praying, singing, studying, and serving that are a threat. This group over here doesn't have that fourth verb in their life.
Yeah.
So they got their little holy huddles. They're having a good time.
They're a
singing.
threat to the enemy is what you mean.
Yeah, they're not a threat to the enemy. He's going to leave them alone. That's
Yeah.
why their lives are so safe and sanitized. This
right.
group over here,
Yeah.
he's constantly bombarding us. I mean,
Yeah.
I know with you guys and our families, man, we get drilled all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Count it pure joy. That's what Jesus said.
Yeah. You've had some people, both of you have had people in your lives that have helped you, imparted wisdom about how to navigate this. Can you share any wisdom? You guys have shared some of it already, but is there any, even just the guy that took you, hey, let's get in the car, that type of thing. But is there any wisdom that you've gotten that has been amazing wisdom for when these things arrive?
Yeah, Gary Black said to me one time when I was, just being drilled, and he just looked at me and said, there's no pain quite like being misunderstood.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a preacher and a communicator and you thrive on trying to be clear.
Yeah.
And then you feel like you're speaking to deaf ears or, that kind of thing. And that just helped me in the moment to hear him acknowledge, that this hurts. This isn't fun,
Yeah.
And I think I think when I was younger, I used to try to say, like, oh, I'm good. I'm not a feeler. Like, that's just not true. You wouldn't be so mad, Scott, if that didn't land in some way, shape, or form. What's interesting as I've gotten older, some of the just most horrendous things get said to me, and I don't have the same kind of reaction, probably because I've had it done so many times, but also because I'm able to recognize, that kind of ouch. Anyway, delete, move on. Or even what's interesting too is the passive aggressive remarks in person. Those are the ones that we have like these moments where we laugh about them a lot, but man, they hurt because it's like, you've got a moment right now with me, and you chose to use it this way. What does that mean?
Yeah, let me play off that a little bit too, because one of the things that people subtly try to do is pit the two of us against one another. And
people compare you guys.
I'm not going to let that happen in my own heart because I love this guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, why would you do that? I would never do that to another person.
They do it to us when we're together, which is fascinating. And I experienced this in Colorado too, and I've experienced it here. Like early on out there, I remember vividly standing next to Jim one time at an event, and we're just talking because we were friends. You know, we hang out. Yeah. And somebody walked up and was like, I just can't decide which one of you I like better. And we're like, we both in that moment go, you don't have to. I like him better. He likes me better. Whatever. It's weird. It's very odd how people do that.
Yes. You mentioned. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, when there's criticism that's, whether it's warranted or unwarranted, man, apologize quickly if it's warranted.
Yeah.
But also forgive quickly, because you really don't want to take that into the next day and into the next relationship. It can really, really make you angry. I think there are a lot of angry people out there, and it's just because they haven't known what to do with criticism.
Well, and I'll tell you another thing that I think could be vital. It is for me. Like, timing is significant.
Yeah.
When I receive criticism really matters. You know, so if I start checking email on Sunday afternoon, in the old days when I was on social media, if I was sitting on the sofa scrolling through comments, that was never a healthy thing because I'm exhausted, tired, So that's why when you drive home and if the first thing you receive when you walk through the door is a criticism, man, it hurts because it's like I'm already exhausted from the day.
Yeah.
And then the first thing I get is a barrage of criticism. Just acknowledging that the timing can really impact you in significant ways can help you navigate it.
Yes.
And create maybe some guardrails around it. So sometimes I tell men, like, if you have a really short commute home, maybe you got a wife at home with babies or something like that, and she's exhausted too, you may want to take a minute before you turn that last corner and pull up your driveway to pray, recalibrate your heart, shift from work mode into family mode, and ask God to give you some strength for that, because that's often much harder than what you've already done throughout the day.
Yeah.
And the Bible basically commands us to not be a person with a critical spirit.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to just get in the habit of not focusing on bad things in any circumstances, but trying to find some good in it. So if someone cooks a bad meal or someone cuts your hair poorly, whatever the situation is, man, just be careful with your words. And even in your own mind and what you say to your, even safe people, you can go and make fun of that or say stuff. It's just a good habit to not do that. Just show some restraint.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Really good. You talked about Jesus already, just how he was shot on both sides. I mean, Pharisees, Sadducees, teachers of law, Roman government. John 6, he teaches, and it says that many of his disciples left because of what he taught was a really hard teaching. He was misunderstood by non-loving God people. He was misunderstood by the disciples, even his own family. He battled this thing of criticism. And he tells us in John 15, he says, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I've chosen you out of the world. This is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you, a servant's not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours as well. They will treat you this way because of my name, for they do not know the one who sent me. And so we've already touched kind of the idea of just kind of diving into this idea of how do we respond rightly? How do we respond in a God-honoring way? And you guys mentioned, because you don't just get bad emails, you get great emails. And the reality is, I've watched so many guys, and you all have too, that came into the world that we're living in ministry. And again, you can translate to your own world, whatever you do. But they came in as servants. They came in excited to be able to follow Jesus and help people know him. And then along the way, they got a lot of feedback, and things continued to grow. And all of a sudden, they moved from this idea of being a servant to a celebrity, and then they think it's about them. And so we have to be so careful. You mentioned earlier about encouragement and also criticism. About what'd you say about your heart and your head?
Yeah, don't let compliments go to your head and criticism go to your heart.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is a tension when it comes to, especially as you age. You can develop calluses to where you don't become receptive to helpful critique.
Yes.
And that's a danger.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, you can get so beat up over time that you just you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so this goes back to the resilience thing we've been talking about so much, but you've got to be in a place where you're strong and flexible. You got to be able to maintain some softness and receptivity. And you've also got to have some strength to not just allow everything to sink deeply into your heart. And that's hard.
And as bad as some of it is, the amount of, and I get them too, but you guys get them in baskets. But just if you're not rooted in your identity, if you don't know, if you're relying on what other people to tell you who you are and why you matter, you better. I mean, it's a treadmill that you can't get off of, and it either leads to pride or it leads to despair. But you being rooted in who God says that we are, we're just trying to be the best stewards of what it is that God has for us. And it's like I want to say thanks when people encourage me, but I also want to turn and go, hey, how can I help? But we can start believing something. At the Emmy would just, hey, pour on the coals. Yeah, man. I mean, you've arrived. You finally got here. Everybody looks at. I mean, just all of that stuff, and we have to constantly knock that stuff down.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be a preacher here for a minute. Like accusation and accolades are both dangerous, and obviously the enemy he is an accuser. Like that's what he is. That's what he does. So accusation, if you're a believer, is always from the enemy.
Yes.
Jesus has no accusation for us.
Yes.
So if what you're hearing or receiving or experiencing is you are this, you are that, and that's not in line with you are a adopted child of God. There's nothing you could do to ever make me love you any more or any less. Then you're dealing with lies and accusation. Now on the other side, accolades are also dangerous. That's why people who don't surround themselves with, as John calls them, humility brokers. We've got some folks around us who they're really good at keeping our feet firmly planted, on the ground, because they're so valuable to be around us because they're not enamored with who we are at all. And that is so valuable to have around you.
Yeah, one of my goals is to grow in humility and kindness every year, and this role makes that really hard on both fronts. Okay, and so I would just tell you that one of the things I've tried to avoid over the years is comparison.
Yeah.
So people always love to ask, who are you listening to? I don't listen to anybody. I listen to Scott because he's here and he's my brother and we're teaching together. So I get to, sit and listen to him be my preacher, which is fun.
Yeah.
But I'm not falling prey to the comparison thing. He's a unique guy. God's gifted him in unique ways. I celebrate that.
Sure.
When I get to hear other people, which is pretty rare, I do the same thing. You just got to be really careful with comparison because it can go either way.
Yeah.
Elevated view or lower view of yourself than you need to have. So.
Absolutely. And I think a really good measurement, one of the fun things about doing this with John is like, I legitimately, when I'm sitting out there, want to see him hit a grand slam. But that's not how when comparison has a hold on your heart, what you're actually rooting for is for that guy to strike out.
Just get on base.
Weird.
Just get a single.
Every man knows exactly what I'm talking about, especially if you've ever played any kind of sport where, man, that guy's on your team.
Yes.
But you're in your heart going, yeah, good, he struck out.
It's weird.
That's bad and really damaging to unity. So that's something to acknowledge and then really work against.
Yeah, John the Baptist, it's like at some point he just goes, I got to decrease. Jesus got to increase.
His disciples fed into it. Hey, everybody's going to him. What should we do?
Well, if that has not been your standard operating procedure, I would tell you try it and watch the joy that comes to your heart and to your life because there's freedom in that. Then you're not the competitive thing in me. I've talked about it. I had to crucify that years ago.
Yeah.
Man, sports were not a good thing for me.
Yeah. two Bible characters, and then we'll kind of start moving toward wrapping up. The first one's Nehemiah. The book of Nehemiah is a great book on leadership. If you've not read this book, he gets word about the destruction of a city, the walls. He weeps over his people and the destruction that's happened to God's people. He spends time in prayer. He is able to go and survey the land. He's gotten favor from God and the king to go. And actually the king actually blesses him with resources that he needs to go rebuild the wall in the city. And then he gathers these people and he casts vision and he empowers them to work together to rebuild this wall. And even halfway through, people get discouraged. There's a lot going on. There's some resistance. And so he has to recast the vision because it leaks. And then you just see time and time again, he's experiencing resistance from the Arabs, the Ammonites, the Ashdodites. The three specific leaders from these groups criticized Nehemiah the harshest, men known as Sanballat, I think I'm saying that right. He's mentioned 10 times in the book, Tobiah and Geshem. And in Nehemiah 6, they try to pull Nehemiah out of his work with plans to intimidate or to harm him or even kill him. And they tried this 5 different times. And so it's so much so that Nehemiah says, hey, listen, I need you to hold 2 things, a sword and a trowel, one to work and one to fight, just in case. And one of the coolest things that he responds to them is Nehemiah 6:3. It says, so I replied, like, come on down, man, we want to talk with you, blah, blah, blah. And he says, I replied by sending them a message, not engaging. I am engaged in a great work and I can't come down. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? And he just does so many things. He prays, he reassures his people, he assembles them together, and he just chooses not to engage. And he says, I'm doing a great work. And so 2 questions around Nehemiah. Can you guys speak to his example here? And then the second one is how do you take his example and not get sideways or burn lots of mental or emotional energy chasing down things that can distract you from the work that God's called us to do here?
Clarity. I mean, his clarity around his mission drove his actions.
Yes.
And so he was clear. Man, God's given me this work.
Yes.
I've been resourced to do this work. We're actually making progress on this work. It's a vital work. It's an important work. I don't have time for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I do take time for you, it's going to be with this sword probably, because the trowel's only for up here. If I come down off the wall, it's probably going to be with this. So I'm not going to do that unless you force the issue. I mean, it's a beautiful picture of just mission clarity. And I think if you don't have that, it's so easy to become responsive to the wrong things at the wrong time in the wrong way, but because he had it, he could say no.
Yeah, well said. I think too, it's a menial task. He's building a wall.
Yeah.
It's monotonous.
Yeah.
So I think this book applies to just about any area of a man's life. So your marriage, your parenting, your career.
Yeah.
Stay on the wall. Handcuff yourself to the mission. Whatever your goals are in each of those categories, stay focused on those and don't let these other people distract you, and you'll be satisfied.
Yeah. 12 bricks today, may not seem like such a big deal, but boy,
you stack enough of them.
Our culture's so big on get the touchdown. It's like, man, these first downs. Just
grind
slow,
it out.
methodical, grind it out. And at the end of your life, you'll be standing where very few people are standing.
Obedience, intentionality, courage, faith, all of that. The second example is Jesus. And so we'll talk about how he does respond. And then the second part of it is when he says nothing. And so there are a number of times where Jesus responded to criticism. He went after the Pharisees, Sadducees, teachers of law. And he said some really, really strong things. And so there are times where we go, all right, we need to go talk this out and bring grace and truth into the matters, and the Bible tells us to do that too. What can we learn from Jesus here?
Well, I think it's easy to think Jesus just for some reason gets more riled up, at them. But the question's why.
Yeah.
And he tells us, you're blind guides. You're weighing people down with burdens that you can't even carry, and definitely they can't. You are literally ushering people into hell. In other words,
strong.
You're working counter to my mission of reaching lost and broken people, and that showed up all the time. He's hanging out with Zacchaeus, and they're lobbing grenades.
Yeah.
Woman caught in the act of adultery, literally going to lob stones.
Yeah.
So it's not just that these dudes are insiders who know the scriptures and should know better, but it is that.
It is that.
You should know better.
Yeah.
And also, you're actually leading people away from heaven towards the gates of hell. he calls them whitewashed tombs.
Yeah.
People's contact with you actually contaminates them and keeps them further from God. You know, I mean, those are really strong words, but it's not just because he's irritated. It's because they've literally set themselves up as Satan's allies.
Yes.
So for me, that brings clarity.
Yeah, I would say, like, in our role here, we got criticism one time when we canceled services on Sunday because we were going to do a bunch of stuff for Christmas, and it went crazy. The whole United States was just firing mean stuff at us, and so I had to take a week because I knew if I had responded that particular Sunday, it wouldn't have been good.
Yeah.
So I took a week to really pray, clear my head, think about it, and be a little bit more measured in my response to that criticism. The key was I wasn't the bullseye in that. Our church was.
Yeah.
And so I felt like, man, the reputation of our church is on the line here.
Correct.
I need to defend that.
Yeah.
You know, I had to defend my kids one time, and I just decided to do it quietly and silently. I've still never spoken to the issue. I just pulled them out of a situation I knew wasn't good because there were mean people aiming stuff at my kids that should have been aimed at me.
Sure.
Right. So sometimes when it's aimed at me, I do what Jesus did, which is I just don't say anything because you got to consider the source of that or the outcome of that. What's really at play here? It's not that important. If it's really important, do something.
Yeah, and if it's, you know, Jesus was often most unresponsive when he was headed towards the cross. You know what I mean, he's getting ready to accomplish the reason he came, you know, and
he speaks to Pilate. He doesn't speak to Herod, which is interesting. Yeah, and I think he saw receptivity in Pilate potentially to his mission and his message. He didn't with Herod, so he didn't even talk to the guy, which is interesting, you know. Tells you a lot.
It really
so
does.
shake the dust off your sandals and move on with certain people because it's not going to matter at the end of the day.
Yeah. Two personal questions for you guys. How do you keep criticism from darkening your own heart? A lot of people in leadership, including church leaders, you do this long enough, you take enough hits, you can get jaded, you can get paranoid, you can get insecure, you can begin to put this gigantic wall up, and you can smile, but you just become completely untrusting of everyone. How do you keep your hearts in the right place?
I haven't done it well. Let's be honest. I mean, it's hard. Last week or the week before, we had an elders meeting, and there was a comment made about this secondary meeting that was going to happen, and Scott was in the room, and I said, man, as long as we're not going to discuss stuff that's going to impact the church, because I don't want to be there for this meeting. It was going to be another layer of meetings I just didn't have the energy for. I didn't handle that well in the meeting, okay? Yeah. So I had an elder come to me immediately after, and he goes, hey, you're paranoid. And I thought, yeah,
I am.
I am, and I've got some reason to be, but I shouldn't allow that to continue to affect me because the guys in that room aren't the source of that paranoia or suspicion. It was years ago.
Right.
So I'm still in process. I'll just be honest with you. That's not a done deal on me.
Well, I mean, we could keep going down a list of things where if you allow, first of all, you have to acknowledge that it can darken your heart.
Yeah.
You know, if you try to pretend that it won't or it can't, then you're in more danger.
I think you're lying.
Yeah, you're lying for sure.
Yeah.
So, but the trick is, and I don't know how to do this,
Yeah.
you know, like you're saying, is to not allow those things to so harden you or jade you that you become paralyzed moving into the future. Because there's no way to navigate into the future without taking risks, which means I'm vulnerable again. I could get hurt. Those around me could get hurt. The church could get hurt. But what's the other option? The other option is to, you know, just fold up shop and hide, and that's not, and isolate, and that's not good either.
No.
So there is risk involved. Like it's definitely like, man, this could burn me again, you know, or it might not. But you don't know. You just don't know. So it can definitely darken your heart. But I think the acknowledging side is really key.
Yeah. Jesus took a risk to come and put on flesh and to love us, to demonstrate God's love for us, and die, and hoping that people would come to a realization of who he is and what he's done and why we needed rescue. There's plenty of people that took advantage of that. And the reality is if they're going to leave Jesus in John 6, they'll leave your church too, and so in all of this, we just have to be mindful of that. And when Jesus says, "Hey, love your enemies, pray for your enemies," those are big words. And you know, he's on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Here's another personal one. How do you discern what you bring home to your wife and your kids? Because there's plenty of dudes that are in crazy hard jobs that are trying to figure this out, and they don't know how to carry it. And that's why even you talking about that drive home, parking it for a second and unloading things to the Father and figuring out what what things you need to discern that you should bring home, because you don't want to rob your family of your day or your wife of what went on, but also you can't just give her everything, especially in church work, you know.
Yeah, it's very different on how I handle that in regards to my kids versus my wife.
Yeah.
And I have different kind of thresholds. My kids get almost nothing.
Yeah,
You know,
I
it's
agree.
like I want them to absolutely just love this place every time they walk through the doors of this place. I don't want them to see any shadows or anything
You're
like
looking
that.
over their shoulders.
Yeah. So I don't want them to be exposed to anything other than the goodness of this church.
Yeah.
My wife is different, and one of the things I've tried to utilize over the years is to go, I try not to just live stream my frustrations to her.
That's a great analogy.
So,
That's right.
so it's not like, I'm texting her throughout you'll never believe what so-and-so walked into my, I don't do that at all.
Right.
If anything, I've erred on the other side of probably not telling her enough. And then eventually she has one of those moments with me where you all right? And actually I'm not. But my approach has been, if this is something that's repetitive over time, that's keeping me up, and it's a long-standing issue, I'm going to at least give her a window into that.
Yeah.
But I don't want her to run into somebody at Walmart, or whatever, and think, well, Scott just talked about what that person emailed or said or did or whatever, and now she's in a tricky situation. I'd rather her be able to just be ignorant.
Yeah. He preached a helpful message to our staff a couple years ago where he talked about there's two kinds of weight. There's weight you pick up, and then there's weight that's put on you.
That's good.
And, I would echo everything he said about my wife and kids, and then I would just add to the fact that if I've picked this up, if this is something that I've chosen to take on as a leader, I'm just going to own that and be responsible for that without putting that weight or burden on my wife.
Yeah.
Now, when other people put stuff on me that's just not fair and it's mean, I am going to talk to her about that, because I don't want her walking blindly. She can be super naive and walk into stuff that's just going to be hard when it hits her. And I'd rather she be prepared for
you don't want
that.
to set her up to fail.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, there's a landmine right next to that person over there, and you need to know it.
That's right.
I don't want you to step on it and get blown up.
Yeah, that's good. A couple verses, and then we're real close. James 1:19-20. I'll just read them. If you want to share something in here, that's fine. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And so, man, we typically do the opposite. We're usually slow to listen, quick to speak, and quick to become angry. But Jesus' half-brother is saying, hey, quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. Ephesians 4:15, instead speaking the truth in love, we will grow in every respect toward this mature body of him who is the head, that is Jesus. And so we have to when we engage, and when God brings us clarity and discernment that we need to engage in conflict or resolve something, then we bring truth in love. That's crucial. You all mentioned this, Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. There are times where you can, if you're not careful, you'll just bring gasoline into something instead of water. And it's like learning to diffuse stuff. It's taken me a long time to get to that place, because it's like words matter. I want people to know my motivation. And at the end of the day, it's like, you know what? This is unto the Lord, and if you don't like it, okay, it's fine. And then the last part's forgiveness. Ephesians 4:32, be kind and compassionate, tenderhearted, which is big, forgiving each other just as God in Christ forgave you. Anything in there in those verses that stick out?
Well, John says this all the time, and I just think it's true. Most men just don't listen.
Yeah.
They just don't listen.
Yeah.
And so I think if one takeaway, in the middle of this is really, there's tension, because it's like we don't want to just listen to every criticism and just get, barraged all the time and give, too much credit to the enemy, blah, 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 all those things we've talked about. But there is a posture of listening that all men could take on and try to practice. And back to your point about, like, just try it.
Yeah.
Just try to actually listen to your spouse. Just try to actually listen to your children.
Yeah.
Try to actually listen to that friend, whoever it may be.
Yeah.
And you don't have to fix
Yeah.
anything. Just listen. And then say, man, thanks for sharing that with me.
Yeah, you don't have to fight them back and go, no, you don't understand. It's like, hey, man, I appreciate you sharing that. I'll process that and pray about it. Try to course correct in any way that I need to.
It's fascinating when someone's in front of you and they critique you, and you go, thank you, I'll take that into consideration, or whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And then you just land there, back to your being awkward thing.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with that,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Yep.
Yeah, I tell our girls, I've told them for a long time, tough skin, soft heart. And when criticism comes, God wants us to have tough skin. We have to be sensitive about every little thing that comes up, overly sensitive, overly offended, and a soft heart. We don't want soft skin, and we don't want a hard heart. And so tough skin, soft heart is what we're looking for. I'll wrap this up. I'll ask you guys one last question, but Teddy Roosevelt, 26th president, you know where I'm going. He says it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error or shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Any final thoughts or encouragement, whether it's to our men or other pastors who are young, church planters, or anything like that, just in addressing conflict? Anything else that you want to share just as we're going to wrap up?
It just ties in so well with what you said about Nehemiah. You know, it's like this dude's on the wall.
Yeah.
He's got a trowel in one hand, a sword in the other. He's got something that's actually being accomplished. Those dudes are down there. Yeah. They're the editorial board or whatever they are. Let them just keep doing whatever they're going to do.
Away.
But this thing right here that you're doing is worth it. And at the end of the day, back to John's point, string enough of those together, you're going to have the bumps, the bruises, the scrapes, the scars, and you're also going to have a wall.
Yeah,
you know, you're also going to have a family. You're also going to have
legacy,
hopefully grandchildren, all that kind of stuff. So just stay the course. You know, that's the last piece of this sermon series we're in right now. Stay calm, stay connected, and stay the course.
That's good. That's good. Anything, man?
Well said.
Listen, if you're going to step out and lead at home, at work, in church, a board or committee, in any arena, expect criticism. It's unavoidable. So stay in the arena, keep fighting, keep leading. Don't allow the sting of criticism to keep you from the good things that God wants to do in you and through you. If this podcast has encouraged you, I'd love to hear from you. If you wrestle with Christianity, want to know more about what it means to follow Jesus or take a step and be baptized, or you just need help figuring out your next step, shoot us an email at lockerroom@southland.church. We'd be happy to help you in any way that we can. And as always, if this podcast has encouraged you, share it with a friend, man. There's so many guys that are bombarded by criticism, and I think this will be a cup of cold water for them. Guys, thanks for coming on. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time on Locker Room.